Okay, we are recording on the Zoom. Let me pull up the podcast.
So cool.
First time ever doing an interview and a podcast and both together. So we're banging it all
Love it.
out.
I love it. Happy to be a
And
part of it.
all right, welcome to episode 19. We have a guest speaker, our first ever interviewee. I
Yay.
make up my own words sometimes. This is Alison. We are also recording this via Zoom and will be available on my YouTube. And Alison, do you have YouTube as well?
I don't, but I'll share it on all social platforms.
There you go. Okay, so I met Alison actually via Instagram. I found her page, I think via a sobriety page. I am 5 years sober, 5.5, and Alison, you're at least 20 years?
Almost 17.
Woo!
Yeah, I'm just shy.
So badass. So badass.
Thank you.
And I know sometimes social media gets a bad rap, but it can also connect you with some really badass people, some people who are, they've been through it and they're sharing it and they're sharing the tools, how they got through it. And I was instantly attracted to her page. We have a lot in common, obviously. We're both sober sisters who share our journeys. Alison is also an author, and we're going to talk later a little bit about her book. When did you publish your book?
Came out in May this year, so amidst the pandemic. So it was a nice sprinkle amidst the mess. Yeah.
Yes, and so needed.
Yep.
Okay, so she is an author. She is an athlete. She is 17 years sober. She is also an eating disorder and a body image warrior, which really interested me about bringing her on the podcast because obviously I share all things, but eating disorders is not something that I personally struggle with. So being able to bring on that viewpoint, especially from someone who is as strong, they've beaten it, they're a warrior, and they're already sharing their journey. I think that is obviously so badass. And so I asked her to do an interview. I've already called her a badass like 18 times. She hasn't run away, so we're good.
I like it.
And so I'm just going to start this off. I'd like to, how about you tell us a little bit about you?
Awesome. Thank you. And I appreciate the reference as a badass. One of my best friends gave me, it's buried, but I have a badass little bracelet that it's in Morse. So if you run your hand across it, can't read Morse, it's badass. So literally haven't taken it off since Christmas. So it's either going to last forever or be, totally dead and decrepit in another week. But I appreciate the reference. And I literally was just on the phone before this, Melissa, sharing with a friend of mine about how, if used correctly, social media is a beautiful tool and a connector to people like you, and a way to share in a way that you can reach more people in an authentic way if you are that way. And for whatever reason, I've been gifted the ability to do that with words, and I don't have a problem speaking. I don't have a problem being me wherever I am. And for better or worse, right? Here's what you get. So I don't know what's coming out of my mouth tonight. So it'll be a treat for all of us.
That's like every week on my podcast. So no difference.
The best way to be. It's the best way to be. And, I really, my whole intention in sharing ever is to just break down the stigma that is addiction and recovery. Right? Because, I've been sober a long time. I got sober when I was 18 years old. So my whole adult life is sobriety from alcohol and drugs. And with that though came other things. And I think alcoholism and drug addiction are more widely talked about because alcohol and drugs are not a vital part of day-to-day life. Whereas food and body and anything related to those two things is. Like, you cannot have a life if you do not eat. You cannot sustain vitality, health without food. And because it's a necessary part of life, I think it's a really scary, delicate topic, especially if you struggle with it And also if you already have admitted powerlessness over alcoholism and drug addiction, now you have to admit you're fucked up in another department. It's like, there's a lot of those things going on that I found for me. So I figured if it couldn't be just me. And one woman shared her story with me, which gave me enough courage to share mine with her. And then it ripples. So, my intention is just to break down that stigma of what it might look like. And not to say that alcoholism and drug addiction recovery is easy, but I have to say, for me, it has been a lot easier than recovery from bulimia, anorexia, body image related issues, because I have omitted those things from my life. And if I really want to, can avoid them at all costs. I cannot omit food. I cannot get rid of my body as hard as I've tried in the past. It is here to stay, right? And
Yes,
it is
so
such
true.
a widely abused form of substance, and not even just abused, but celebrated, right? That's how people connect socially, by eating, especially if you get sober. What the hell else are you going to do, right? Or now, you turn into a fitness freak, right? So there are so many different pieces of that part. And so, I got sober at 18. My first addiction really was food. And of course, I couldn't have told you that at the time, but looking back as a kid, and this is not said with judgment, this is just what I remember, which again, from my vantage point, may not even be true. As you grow up and you look back, you're like, that shit didn't even happen. But it's the story I've told myself for so long. But I was fed differently than my brother. Foods were categorized as good and bad. I had a feeling that I was bigger. Whether that's true by pictures, that is certainly not. I've never been a large person ever, but it doesn't matter what you actually are, it's what you think you are, right? And so I was plagued by that not enoughness from single digit prepubescent years. And, food became my friend early on, right? I was too young to get into drugs and alcohol first, although it didn't take long. I think puberty is awkward for everyone. I don't think any kid is unscathed going through puberty, right? So, that's where I found drugs and alcohol, but I started binging by the time I was 8 or 9, right? Secretly eating out of the fridge. And because my family is small and outwardly focused, and I don't say that with judgment, because, we all have the right to look and feel and do all those things. It was not an option to be fat. So I had to do something with the food always. And so I learned how to purge when I was young, or I exercised it off, or, starve all day, eat at night. And so those behaviors became rampant very young. And I just had a really dysfunctional relationship with food, and for me, no one can argue that a carrot versus an Oreo, there's different nutritional characteristics. However, I am not bad if I eat the Oreo instead of the carrot, but that is the messaging that I received and the story that I really solidified into adulthood about food, right? I am bad if I choose certain foods or don't look a certain way, as opposed to this is my choice right now. This is my choice later. This may yield more energy this way. This may be better for me. It was more like good or bad, right? Which is a really unhealthy story for a young person to believe. And I think a lot of people hear that, right? And I, by no means am an expert at parenting. I have yet to cross that threshold, but I think it's probably really hard to guide your kids nutritionally, right? When there are so many choices, and depending on your own personal story with food, what that might look like. So frankly, drugs and alcohol spared me for many years from my eating disorder, because it took off the care button, right? I numbed out. I didn't care. I didn't care what I looked like. I didn't care what I felt like. My whole means of using were to get out of self, right? And so, fast forward to 18, and, by the time I got sober, I had gotten into heroin, which I'm told is not a recreational party going habit to develop, right? I was very into horseback riding. That was my sport of choice. For those that don't think horses are a sport, they are. And I, all day long, my boyfriend and I were talking about this recently. I always just thought the horse did it. I'm like, please, babe, get on there and go jump around those, 5-foot jumps for me. Please let me know how that goes. Right. But that was my sport of choice, and I took it very, very seriously. And I credit the horses with my sobriety because they were bigger than me, right? They were something that I maintained a care for that was bigger than me. Thank God, right? And I know people get sober without stuff like that, but it certainly helped me, especially at a young age. I didn't want to lose them. I didn't want to lose what I had with them. And, I had an emotionally high bottom, right? As opposed to a physical, really low bottom. And I had a lot of shame about that for a long time, right? Because I got sober through 12-step recovery. And the stories I would hear by people that were a lot older than me, like I didn't even have the chance to experience that yet. I wasn't old enough to be married. I wasn't old enough to have a home or a car or a job to lose. So I'm sitting in rooms with people that have these war stories where typically you'd shy away from, but I'm in an environment where my disease is telling me like, you're supposed to be like that. So here I am shaming myself right out of recovery. And, I'm really grateful that I haven't drank or drugged since I stopped. But that eating disorder came back with a full vengeance pretty soon after I got sober. And, in the beginning, it was like, how do I survive? I'm in college, I'm young, I feel like my life is over, right? Never mind like all the things that are not working out for me. What am I going to do? That's all I know how to do is party. And, so I got sober young and, we went to the diner, right? In the middle of the night. And I'm so grateful for all those, trips to the diner and all the shit food. And I mean, I wouldn't be here if I didn't take those trips, right? And so whenever a woman or a man comes to me, they hear that I'm sober, but also in eating disorder recovery. And if they're newly sober and they want help, I say, please get sober first. That will kill you before food will. And I'm not undermining bulimia, anorexia, compulsive eating. They are very real. You can certainly die from that kind of stuff. But for me, I really believe alcohol and drugs need to come first, and I've been taught and experienced that the order of my addictions that kill me will be removed in that order, right? So heroin and alcohol were going to kill me before my bulimia was and all my other things after that. And so, if you are listening and you are just trying to tackle getting out of your drug addiction and alcoholism, please just focus on that first. I certainly couldn't have done both at the same time. Because again, you have to eat, right? Like you can't just stop eating, right? And a big part of early recovery is eating. Like that's what you figure out how to do, right? You have a feeling, God forbid, what am I going to do? I'm either going to smoke a cigarette or I'm going to eat a bunch of shit, right? It's probably going to be sugar, like that's what we did, and I don't regret any of that, but I think at some point it caught up to me, and not because it was just at bay. I had never addressed it. And, for me, any kind of addiction is just a means to get out of life on life's terms, right? It's a coping skill that I have allowed to work for me. But at some point it stops working. So in the beginning, it's a survival tactic, right? When I'm a kid and I'm alone and nobody's telling me what's happening with my body, I'm eating because I need comfort. It worked, right? Well, it didn't work eventually, and the purging piece, that's not going to work, right? So, I had a lot of years in recovery from alcohol and drugs before I was even willing to admit that I had a problem with food. I really honestly thought, Melissa, like I would just die sober, but miserable. And no one would have known that necessarily, but like there was something missing, right? I was being blocked from a full life and I knew it. And I was really just unwilling to admit that I needed help with food because I've already admitted I'm powerless over alcohol and drugs. Not, thank God, the last few years, I have a broken picker when it came to men, right? I was a workaholic. I had my own business. I was a horse trainer for 8 years right out of college. So I had already admitted all these things, but like, are you seriously, I can't figure out my body and food? And I just was so ashamed. And I find that people with eating disorders have a different level of shame and remorse and guilt, again, because the whole world has built this ecosystem about diet and body and what you should look like, what you shouldn't, what you should eat, what you shouldn't, should. And so God forbid you're one of me and you have an issue with food and bodies and you're like, where the hell do I go? Right? So to hell if I'm going to admit that I can't figure this out by myself, right? Because the rest of my life looks good now, right? I'm employable, I'm employed, I'm a worker amongst workers, I'm a dog, you know, I'm all the things I'm supposed to be, but I keep falling into this hole with food. And so, you know, I'm going to omit a lot of things. Otherwise, we'll be here for the next 6 years talking, which would be fine, but I'm sure someone would get sick of my voice before me. I ended up selling my horse training business. I just exhausted me. I have done the opposite of most people. Most people start as a corporate employee, don't want people telling them what to do. They start their own thing, happy as a clam. I'm the polar opposite. I had my own gig for a long time. I totally burnt my passion right out of me. I don't ride. I had Olympic aspirations. It was my whole life, right? People that knew me then and meet me now, they don't understand, right? Like horses were my identity and they're not anymore. I think they serve a phenomenal, beautiful purpose. They may come again, but for today, they're not here. And so I'm a corporate employee now. But when I sold my business and stopped riding, I had a huge void, right? I was always fit. Like I kept up with my fitness in the gym with the horses. But I had a void competitively. So I got into bodybuilding. What other sport would be better than competitive bodybuilding on stage, right? With people praising me for my fucked up relationship with body and food. Now, I'm not saying everyone is like that, but you've got to be a certain kind of obsessed with body to pursue a sport like that more than just once as a bucket list item, right? Like there's plenty of people that just want to do it. I give you huge props and they're like, this is really awful and really hard, way harder than you probably imagine, right? But no, I was in it to win it, literally. And I'm like, I'm going to be a pro, the whole thing, because I can't do anything at half mass. So I went from horseback riding to bodybuilding. And I don't regret any of these things, right? It definitely sharpened the pencil on my abnormal focus with self. And I say self because it's not just body, because when you're only thinking about food and the gym and your body and what you look like it's the most self-absorbed place to be. And it's an unconscious place to be. I wasn't doing it to be bad or to be a bad friend or to avoid you and my relationship with you, but I thought that was my solution. If I could just look a certain way, I'm going to be okay. If I can just fit into this little body, right? Because smaller is better, I'm going to be happy and you're going to love me and I'm going to be enough. Because that's the undertone of all these things for me. Like I'm not enough just as I am here right now. And so, you know, I did not do it naturally because God forbid I take my time and put it all together. And so, you know, the combination of the extreme diet and hours of cardio and just preoccupation with self and, you know, the drugs, you know, it was a couple years of a real tornado that I really think helped me get to where I am now, without question. It forwarded me into a place where I didn't want to live that way anymore. So I have trophies. I have crazy pictures. If you Google my name, come up, ass full on display, bent over, right? Spray tan with 6 coats, the whole bit. That is me. My hair is way longer, but it's definitely me. And, you know, I got to a place where like, I just didn't want to live like that anymore. And so all this took place in the Westchester, Pennsylvania area. That's where I got sober. I'm from Maryland. And I had sworn I would never return, not because necessarily anything bad happened, but that's what we do, right? We leave home when we're kids and we're like, fuck that, I'm never going back there, right? So, but it changed. My mom got diagnosed with MS and I really felt a pull to come back and be available should she need me. And she does, right? So never a coincidence, August 1st of 2015 was my last bodybuilding show. I didn't know that would be true, and my last day in Pennsylvania. And so the show was at the university where I went to school, where I got sober. So it was just this really intensely aligned day, all for me, right? But I was so warped into like, I have to win and go pro that I couldn't even appreciate that the stars had aligned in this way to set me off on my way. But, that was my show. And I got back to Maryland at like 1 a.m. that morning. It was a Saturday night. Sunday, I ate everything because that's what you do after you compete. I had cankles Monday because you're so depleted and dehydrated. And then there's nowhere for it to go, right? So like I literally ate everything. And then like by the time you're done your workday on Monday, like you have cankles. Like literally I had cankles. And it goes away fast, but like it's like this can't be healthy, right? This can't be healthy. But you know what? Monday I started back to work. I was working for my father, picking up some businesses of his, and I was in the gym after work, right? I probably even went in the morning to do my cardio, and like off I was going with my Tupperware prepared meals and 30 minutes before and after on the stair mill, lifting 6 days a week. And that's supposed to be my off season, right? And I'm like, this isn't sustainable or fun. There's no joy in this. Like there's no joy, right? So over the next couple months, I just imploded. I think being out of my environment that I had been in for 12 years, my recovery network had to change. I didn't have friends in Maryland, right? Because I had been gone for so long and I no longer did what I did when I had left. Everything was new and I wasn't cocooned and protected anymore, right? So it was acutely obvious that my life was not manageable. And spiritually and emotionally and physically, I just wasn't okay. And I got to a place where I was starting to really be afraid of the consequences from steroids and, my fertility, if I ever want kids, right? My voice was like getting pretty deep. People were like, are you smoking again? What's going on? To this day, I don't know if this is my natural voice. I really don't. I know people love it, so I'm really stoked about that. But I really don't know if this is my voice pre-steroids or not. It's not as deep as it was. But I will say I can't yell anymore. Like if I get excited or angry, like nothing comes out, nothing projects. And occasionally I have this really sexy prepubescent squeak that comes out unannounced. And it's just what happened with my vocal cords. So like, I still don't know if I can have children. I think everything's been reversed. My blood work is great, but those are consequences I was willing to take because I had to look a certain way. And again, there's nothing wrong with looking a certain way. I think I'm actually as lean now as I was competing naturally, but for different reasons. And I went a totally different way about it. So there's nothing wrong with looking that way, but it was my solution to fixing how I felt as a person and deserving to take up space. And so, I competed, I imploded. I said, no matter what happens to me and what I look like, I'm getting off the gear, right? The steroids, because I didn't feel right. I'm a sober woman going to bed at night and I'm living a double life, right? And I didn't want to it didn't make me feel that way, but I just spiritually wasn't doing the right thing for myself. And I knew that. I didn't need anyone to tell me that. I knew it was true for me. So, I went through like puberty at 30 for like 2 years. Like it was really shitty. Don't recommend it. But I'm grateful because it was like, okay, clearly you're not doing the right thing. And I would say throughout that time, at some point, purging was removed from me. Like just kind of like alcohol and drugs. It was like one day purging was no longer an option, which I'm so grateful because that's really scary and it's a really lonely place to be. And I had years of a routine night, right? I wouldn't eat all day. And I skipped a lot because I want you to be able to, pull things apart. But, I had years of starving all day, binging till I had to lay down because I was so uncomfortable, and driving to 5 different convenience stores because God forbid someone saw what I was going to get right at one. So I had this like routine of driving around, getting all the stuff and binging and purging and binging and purging. Like that was my night, right? And I would do it till I cried. And it's in my book in detail, but it just like, I thought that was what was going to be for me, and I'd get up in the morning, hungover, groggy, and promising I'd not do it again to do it again. Cause I didn't have any other tools to help me not do that. And I wasn't telling anyone, and I'm alone. And, eventually I started to share with other people because they shared their story with me, and they, but I never put it all together. Right. I until 3.5 years ago. But the purging was removed, and I tried every diet, and what I've learned is that a diet is not going to fix me, and it's not going to fix my response to me, right? That's the problem. It's not food per se. Now, there are foods that I can't dance with, right? I've had to admit that over the years, and learn that that's true for me for today. And it's interesting because I read my book and I'm like in a totally different place with food and my body than I was when I wrote it, which I hope to be, right? You evolve, you work on yourself, you get better. Or like things just change, right? Recovery with food is not linear and stagnant. It's not like alcohol and drugs. Sobriety is you don't drink or drug, period. There's no wiggle room there. It's very clear. Food, there's a lot of wiggle room for a lot of things. There's no like one size fits all and one way to do it. And so, navigating that in the beginning was really hard, but I just eventually got to a place where, like I said, I knew I was being blocked from a full life and something was missing between my head and my heart. Like I knew something was missing, and I maybe binged like once a month, but all those days in between, I was thinking about food. I was thinking about, am I eating enough? Should I eat more? I did paleo for a while. I did Whole30 for a while. I did the badass body diet because everyone, in my opinion, wants to look like Christmas Abbott. At least I did. And I did what she said, right? You know who she is? Christmas Abbott. She's a really sexy CrossFitter, tattooed, badass chick. She did NASCAR. She just,
maybe I am the worst with
that's
me.
okay. If you Googled her, Christmas Abbott, you'd be
Okay.
like, oh, okay, I get it. So anyway, she wrote a book, Badass Body Diet. I'm like, I'm going to do that. And she simplified macros, right? And then gave you a really small amount to eat. So for me, any book that gives me a meal plan is not going to be catered to me because it's a book. It doesn't know me, right? So I did that for a while. And again, I'm just trying to find a solution without actually admitting that I need help. And eventually, again, I went back through 12-step recovery for my compulsive eating, and I use that for still today. I am 3.5 years plus, more than that, sober from food, which is how I like to look at it. Some people say I'm abstinent. Some people say they're in recovery. Like I just say I'm sober from food because that feels really true for me. I don't use food to alter how I feel, eating more or less of it, right? Food is not a response for me anymore based on what happens or how I feel. Same is true for training, but I know I've been going on and on. So I'd love for you to ask questions because, fitness has been a huge part of this and figuring out like, as an athlete, what is appropriate and what it could be viewed as exercise bulimia, if you want to use a term. But anyway, I'll stop talking briefly.
I mean, I love that you had that, and it's not really a big surprise that you went the bodybuilder route.
Right.
Having that unhealthy relationship, like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can torture myself.
Yeah, that's easy. I do that already.
Food and exercise. Right. I do that already. And I'm not even getting credit for it.
Exactly.
So, it was right in line with your addiction. But, I say there's, I run groups to keep women accountable. And I often say like, there's no bad exercise, but there can be an unhealthy relationship with exercise.
Yes.
And there can be too much exercise, and there can be exercise that is used as punishment.
Yes.
And that's not the point.
Right.
Like, it's a privilege to be able to move your body. And that being said, I recently just saw a post that a year ago you were cleared from an accident. So you had to go without exercise for how long?
Yeah. So I just for backstory context, I went from bodybuilding to competitive obstacle course racing, which was a more,
You're not addicted to anything.
No,
definitely not adrenaline or any of that. No.
Right. Yeah. So but it was way more functional and more food positive, right? I got to see a lot of cool places. Last year, I won the Tahoe Ultra Beast in Lake Tahoe. So that was 31 miles, 70 obstacles, crazy. And then a month later, I fell bouldering and broke my leg. So Halloween of 2019, I was rock climbing, which I did every week. Like that was a grip workout for me. I went by myself. It was cool. It was social. I fell from the top of the bouldering wall and just fell in the right way, cracked my fibula in 2 spots. First injury like that. I've had a lot of concussions, but first injury, like I literally didn't walk for 8 weeks. I had surgery. I have a plate and 8 screws now. So yeah, November 20th of 19, I had surgery and I walked in a boot for the first time on New Year's Eve. So yeah, just a year ago. So I didn't walk, let alone like train for 8 weeks. Now I did some upper body, but like talk about having to put my recovery to work.
Right, exactly. So I broke my neck in 2015. End of
Wow.
2015. I was only 8 months sober.
Jeez.
But I say this all the time, that had that accident been 5 years before or 10 years before I did the mental work,
Yeah.
it would have destroyed me. Could you even imagine going 8 weeks without being able to exercise in your unhealthy form?
No, it wasn't an option. That wouldn't have been, it wouldn't have even been an option.
You just amputate the leg. I'll get a new one.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Right. So even being able to recover through, like, not just recovery in life in general, but being able to recover from what life throws at you because you're in a healthy place.
Yes.
Because it's not one more thing adding on to everything else that you're carrying.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and I'm no longer using it as an identifier of self, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's just, yes. Like, so, and then I say, with nutrition, it's so hard. And when you mentioned with parents, I mean, there is no education on good food.
Yeah.
Like on proper nutrition, on portion sizes, on what kids should be eating. There is zero education about that. Most adults don't even know what they should be eating. Do you know how many 30, 40, 50-year-old women I talk to and they don't eat a single vegetable all day? And I'm like,
I know
why you feel like crap?
Yeah. Yep. They don't drink water, right?
No. And I'm like, you're not a child anymore. And, it's one thing to not know.
Yeah.
It's another to choose to continue to treat your body like a trash can or base your body and self-worth on the way that it looks on food.
Yeah.
It's just, I lost 111 pounds between my girls, and it's nothing compared to the way I see myself. Even after my second pregnancy, even in the second postpartum journey, I loved my body every single day through it. And that's something that I never thought that I could do. Like, I never thought that I'd ever love like 180 something pound Melissa and be grateful for everything that she can still do. And like, that's what I want other people to know is possible. Not that they can just lose some weight. Like, it's not about the scale and it's not about the jean size, because if you get there and you don't fix what's broken, you won't see it.
Right.
Won't see it. You'll get to that size or to that goal, but it won't be good enough.
Yep.
Because now what do? You can't stop. You'll go backwards.
Yep.
And so it either becomes an unhealthy obsession or we just stop and we yo-yo.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have plenty of addictions. My depression is it attacks me. I'm very negative to myself. It's self-sabotage. So that is I'm very thankful that it never involved food in that way and that it was really just alcohol. And I knew very early on that I had an addictive personality, so I never tried anything else. Grateful for that too.
Yeah.
That I never even went down those barrel holes, because it's heavy in my family. And I totally lost my train of thought there. That's me.
All good. All good.
Oh, good. Okay, so the book released in May.
Yep.
And it's available on Amazon. Is it
Yep.
also available on Audible?
It is not. It's
It is not.
Kindle
Okay.
or paperback on Amazon, The Addict in aisle 7.
Okay.
I'd love to do audio, but I know that will take some time. So not yet.
Not yet, but
Not yet.
maybe down the road.
Yes.
And you have a blog, which I
Yes.
can link. I will link a little bit of description, some bio for Alison. I believe it'll let me link your book title from Amazon, even the link to purchase, and her blog. And if you have any questions for her, I can also probably link. I'm not tech savvy. I will try to link her social media.
That'd be awesome.
I also have a online community on Facebook, and we can always add Alison in there. And if anyone has any questions, they can ask her in there. So what do you think your first steps to self-love and self-acceptance were? Now, I know you said you did the 12 steps, and so
Yep.
would that be it for you?
No, I think 12 steps teach me how to live in relationship with myself. They clear out the mud, so I have some information to work with. Like, why do I do these things? Why do I end up in these relationships over and over and over again? What do I do differently? And so I think a lot of it is fake it till you make it, which is one of our slogans, but really more it's enacting my way into loving myself and accepting myself. Like, I can't personally stand in front of the mirror and affirm myself verbally and believe that. That's not my process. My process is treating myself well through the next best action. So for me, with food directly,
I love that.
No matter what,
Again, hold on. Treating myself well by the next best action. That was worth repeating. I love that.
Yeah, but it's true, right? Because there are days where I feel like shit, like this morning. Like, I was in it. I have 10 days left of my sales year. I'm so close to where I need to be. And it's like, I can't see the light, right? And I'm feeling it. I'm just feeling it. And it's okay. I'm a human, right? When we're in recovery, we're not promised that we're never going to hurt again. We're just promised that we don't have to hurt from that substance anymore. Should I choose not to ingest it? But, so for me, it's truly the next best action. So with food, it's because of my old behaviors. Like, I used to, and I know people do this, you end your day with a binge. So you start with nothing, right? And because if you just, for me, it was a fear of eating, but also like, I'm still full. I don't feel good. I don't deserve to eat, whatever. So like, no matter what happens the night before I eat breakfast, like, that's rule number 1, right? No matter what happens, I don't eat. And for me, I have a nutritionist because it's part of my recovery and it allows me to live life between meals. I want accountability. I need accountability. I am not an intuitive eater. I will intuitively eat everything or nothing. Like, maybe one day in my journey, but today is not that day. And I'm very comfortable with a plan. Obviously, I did bodybuilding. But I really like that kind of structure. And for me, it's like, okay, I eat 4 meals a day. And I eat about the same. I choose what I eat. I put it together, but I plan it ahead. And then I don't have to worry about it until mealtime. And so for me, like, part of my recovery is eating the next meal when it's time to eat the meal and not in between, because I just feel like it. And that might ruffle feathers in the intuitive eating world. And like, fuck that. Right. I mean, for me, that's been a truth for me. And I just, my history has proven that doesn't work for me. So, I eat breakfast, I follow my meal plan, especially later in the day. I'm always good during the day. It's like those after work hours, you want to decompress. That's when happy hour is for a reason, right? Like, you want to come off your day, you're stressed. And I actually will credit bodybuilding to teaching me about emotional hunger, because I was on this rigid plan. And every day after work, I sold cars for a couple of years in between horses and my father's business. And every day after work, I was hungry. It did not matter if I had just eaten a full meal or not. every day when I clocked out, all of a sudden I was ravenous. And I started to think like, holy shit, like this is not physical hunger. Now there is physical hunger, that's a thing too, but I got to start to feel my emotions. And also, if I do eat the same things every day and I'm taking care of myself, what I see in the mirror is not real, right? Like if I can genuinely assert that I'm doing the best thing for myself, when I notice that I feel really fat when I get nervous or vulnerable, or I have a hard conversation, all of a sudden I gain weight in my belly, or I have a job interview or a meeting or a podcast or something, I get heavy, right? And it's my brain says I'm fat because that's controllable, right? But the reality is I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm scared. So like having a meal plan that I follow allows me to tap into that stuff and start to learn how to cope, right? For me, because the after work and nighttime eating was such a thing, like I don't eat after dinner, no matter what. And it doesn't matter what time I eat dinner. And I, honest to God, never thought I could not eat after dinner. And it's been years. And I'm not hungry. Like I'm just not. And if I am, I know I'm not going to die.
We have two nutrition plans that we offer our clients, and one of them is very structured and helps you. It's balanced macros, in it kind of pairs together even what to eat, like, pair your veggies with your protein and your carb, and so you get a balance of macros, and it's very structured, which is good for people. And for a lot of people, myself included, it's really eye-opening to how much you're eating of one food group, how little you're eating of another.
Yep.
I was way overeating on carbs, under eating on veggies, fruits,
Right.
everything else, basically. Carbs are
Right.
always winning.
Right.
But then we have another plan that is very, very, very flexible. And the whole thing is pick a plan you can see yourself following for life.
Ever. Yep.
And there's tons of educational videos that go with them. It's not just a nutrition plan.
Yeah.
They tackle the psychology of food. I grew up and my mom was always on a diet and I never really put it together. She was going from one diet to the next. And I didn't even really think about it until I watched those videos. And I was like, that's how I grew up with food. Now wonder, when I wanted to see results, I always went to lean cuisines. I always went to diets. I thought that's what we did.
Yep.
I love that my girls will never see me on a diet ever.
Yeah.
But a really flexible plan, there's a lot of tips like water first, veggies most, dinner and done, 2 hands on the wheel, have a hot cup of tea, have something soothing. So, we're big on that too. And it even explains and breaks down like, so dinner is mainly veggies. It's 75% veggies, 25% protein. And it even educates you on carbs give you energy. You don't need energy at dinner. You're going to bed. And so I like that it's even the logic behind it, because I am an alcoholic. And if you tell me if I can't have something, that's all I want. It's all I want.
Right.
So I personally cannot live with deprivation, with, removing food groups, with limiting myself. And so I do like following it because I don't have to think about it. It's like laid out for me, and it's not an extra decision or hassle or, knowledge is power. And when you don't know and you don't understand, it's very overwhelming. And as you try to gain control of it, you just completely lose control at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But I'm so glad that you found things that work for you, because just like you said, sharing our story and realizing that obviously if we struggle with these things, we're not the only one.
Yeah. No.
And so evident, because once you do, people relate. You get the messages, you get the comments, and those people feel the same way. They thought it was all in their head.
Yep.
That they were the only crazy person feeling this way. And so it's so good to share podcasts like this, share videos like this, share stories like this, read books like this, suggest books like this. And it's definitely something that I will be sharing in my challenge group. So who would you recommend your book for?
Mm.
What is your book for?
That's a great question. So I think anyone that is listening going, oh, wow, I'm not the only one who has this brokenness about me, right? That really isn't a brokenness, but it's like anyone that thinks they're alone, anyone that has some kind of preoccupation with food and body. By no means do I have this figured out, right? It is a daily reprieve, and it ever changes. Like I said, what I wrote in here is very different. And when I wrote the book, I wasn't eating a lot of things because I had to start somewhere. And now I eat everything except dessert, because dessert and I just can't party. I don't want one brownie. I want the bakery. And like that remains true. So I just avoid the bakery altogether in my life. I don't miss any birthday parties because there's cake, right? But I would certainly miss the party if I ate the cake, because all I'm thinking about now is the cake. So anybody that has any kind of preoccupation with food or body, anyone's that's sober or trying to be and has something missing, right? Because the subtitle is How I Met God and Myself Through My Body. And God to me is just how we're all connected, right? The universal energy that protects us. But yeah, that's a great question. And if you know anyone that's suffering, right? Because there are a lot of us out there, and there's a lot of confusion around how to talk to someone like that or to support them, and I can say too, just verbal affirmations. I see you, I love you, I'm here, right? I share this space with you, is huge. So great question. Thanks for asking it.
And that's a good one. Yes, because, sometimes we even say things that we think are helpful.
Yeah.
But words can be toxic, and positive words can be taken in a toxic way if the person is in a toxic space.
Right.
So I really like that. And I will say that, my sister does have a past with eating disorders, and I didn't know. So way more often than not, there may be someone in your life struggling with these things, and they are still living very much in their shame bubble.
Yeah.
And they're not open about it. So even just sharing this in general,
yes,
because you don't know who needs to hear it that day. And I have chills, I think. So thank you so much for joining.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Great. Is there anything that you want to add?
I would only say, just to piggyback off what you just said, like an eating disorder is not defined by what someone looks like. And that idea alone prevented me from recovery for a long time, because I have looked normal my whole life, not to me, but to the rest of the world, right? And on a piece of paper, I'm normal, right? If anything, I don't know about right now, I've been fat because of my muscle density to my weight and height. And so like looks can be deceiving, like what you just said. So I think just sharing in general, this is about connecting people, being vulnerable, being more intimate in a world where we're so easily connectable and so far apart, right? So yeah, I just
Even
wanted to add that.
things like I love how you said that you can't have the cake. And I see this a decent amount in my groups, is that don't give someone backlash for the choices that they make.
Yes,
if
you don't know
someone doesn't take the cake, and if someone passes on the cake, allow them to pass on the cake. You can still have the cake. They're not judging you. They are only judging themselves, or trying not to judge themselves.
Correct.
Like, I think that's such a big message, because some people out there,
No, I talk about that in the beginning. Like, this is for you, dear reader, who tries to get me to eat bread every time we go to a restaurant. And the reason I can't eat bread, which I do now, but at the time, is because once I start eating the bread, I can't stop eating the bread. Yeah. And I'm no longer present for you at this dinner.
Right.
So yeah, thank you.
It's just like the alcohol. Exactly.
Exactly.
Well, you can't completely omit it.
Right.
And so you have to learn your boundaries. Mm-hmm. And where you can stay in a healthy place, in a healthy relationship. Yep. Well, thank you so much, Allison.
This was fun. Thank you.
I can't wait until we launch this. Hopefully this weekend. I will share it with you, share all the things.
Yes. Thank you. This was fun. Thanks, Melissa.
I'm going to stop the recording on the podcast.